Scientific endeavors require a community of scientists. Not to be democratic, though, that's not the reason. Rather, it involves developing consensus based on evidence to support existing and new scientific theories. It benefits from scientific behaviors such as generating scientific ideas, testing those ideas, publishing scientific journals, organizing conferences, training scientists, distributing research funds, and reviewing the work of others. In essence, this helps to build upon the cumulative knowledge to advance what we understand about the natural world. Collaboration between scientists can be on a small or large scale within and between disciplines, laboratories, organizations, and countries, and facilitated even more by virtual communication. A few examples of scientific collaboration that directly and significantly impacted mankind are the Manhattan Project, Human Genome Project, and Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. One example we will investigate through this Nature of Science video is how species acquire their taxonomic classification. Taxonomy is the branch of science concerned with systematic classification, especially of organisms. In organismal classification, the conventional hierarchy is domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and then finally species. There are further divisions to this hierarchy too, but these intermediate taxa are going to be ignored by us. The taxonomic ranks are ordered from most inclusive to least inclusive. In other words, there are more species in a phylum than there are in a class. Every known organism has a classification for each taxa within the hierarchy, beginning with domain and ending with the species name, and these names are agreed upon and developed at a series of conferences by scientists. Before we discuss this, let us first begin with a brief history on taxonomy. Carolus Linnaeus was born on May 23, 1707, in Stenbrohult, Sweden. As a child, he grew very fond of plants. His fascination only grew as he entered university to study medicine, where he spent most of his time collecting and studying plants. His passion, travels, and culmination of work eventually led to his most famous body of work, Systema Naturae, originally published in 1735. This is how our modern taxonomic system started. Before Linnaeus, species were given long and easily changed Latin names. When he came onto the scene, he decided to start by grouping plants based on sexual structures of flowers. His basic method was to identify distinct species, group similar species in a genus, genre into orders, then classes, and finally kingdoms. To resolve the difficulty with remembering all taxa of a species, he invented a shorthand which we now call binomial nomenclature, the genus-species name. He did keep the Latin naming technique and applied it to his own name for good measure. Carolus Linnaeus was on track to influencing humanity for generations to come. There were several flaws with his system, like including representatives in a taxon that seemed unnatural and focused on a limited scope of an organism's anatomy and physiology. It also challenged then contemporary ideas and feelings about sex. But what we scientists have kept is the hierarchy and binomial nomenclature. Future editions of Systema Naturae also brought some controversial ideas, particularly as they relate to humans. In the second edition, Linnaeus created the race concept because he observed there were 4 subvarieties of humans based on geographical divisions. As the term race became more pervasive in daily life, it also became interchangeable with species and variety. As the 18th century carried on and the race concept spread across the globe, it became justification for racial hierarchies and condoning practices of the slave trade. Other parts of his system also pervade, like our scientific name, Homo sapiens, and that we are grouped with animals. He also coined the term mammal to refer to animals that bear live young and whose females suckle them. As stated before, binomial nomenclature still persists from Linnaeus' original system. This is defined as the system of devising or choosing the 2 names used to denote a species of living organism, the first indicating the genus and the second the species. It follows very specific conventions which you are going to be expected to follow. The genus name is capitalized, but species name is not. In fact, all names are capitalized except for the species name. If you type the name, you must use italics, or if handwritten, underline the name. The genus name can be abbreviated to the first letter, but the species name cannot. And please do not call one specific type of a living thing a species, which is money in the form of coins. Why on earth, literally, do we need such a system of naming organisms? First, taxonomy makes it easier to study and understand the diversity of living things in the world. It also helps us to get a better understanding of the degree of biodiversity on Earth. Thirdly, the model helps us predict what types of characteristics to expect when viewing a plant, animal, or whatever before seeing or studying them in detail. Fourth, we can also create phylogenetic trees to predict the relatedness between species, and this is even more important as we can base classifications on biochemical evidence rather than morphological evidence. Additionally, it gives an idea of local fauna, which can help with combating invasive species. But probably most important, it reduces confusion between various regions and languages. Each language uses different common names for species, and the universal nomenclature makes it possible for someone in Japan to share research on a species with a person in Denmark without having to learn local names for the same organism. So, even within the same language, confusion could arise. Binomial nomenclature clears all that confusion. How are all these names developed then? Every 4 years, the International Congress of Zoology convenes to agree upon the names for animals. The most recent congresses were held in Beijing, China, Paris, France, Haifa, Israel, and Okinawa, Japan. While many topics are discussed, members and attendees make decisions about scientific names for newly discovered species and how to reclassify familiar species based on new evidence. They follow relatively simple rules in the process. Each scientific name must be unique as to not confuse it with another organism, names must be universally understood, and the system must retain stability so that names are changed only for valid reasons. This process is repeated for similar congresses, but for plants, fungi, algae, and bacteria. As new techniques and evidence are produced, scientific names may be changed to reflect the evolutionary relationships between species, only as long as they are agreed upon at congresses, reflecting cooperation and collaboration between groups of scientists.